Hey, what's up, guys? It's good to see all your faces again. It's good to have you guys back. I hope you had an awesome Christmas break and awesome New Year's break, but I'm also super glad to see your guys' face here at 412 again. This week, we are going to be starting our series. Actually, this is going to be kind of an introduction week to our new series that we're going to start off the new year with called The Greatest. We're going to be talking about the greatest commandment that God has ever given us. And it comes from Matthew chapter 22. It's going to be the text that we're opening up. So you guys can open your Bibles to Matthew chapter 22, and we're going to read about how God tells us the greatest commandments are 1, to love God, and 2, to love people. Glad to see you guys.
Jesus answered, "The most important command is this."
Jesus answered, "The most important command is this.
Aloha te ariki katoa atua menari." Okay.
Listen, people of Israel, the Lord is our God.
Oye, Israel, el Señor nuestro Dios es el único Señor.
Love the Lord your God. Love him with all your heart.
Ibatuba fe olom ba wambe fun.
All your soul, all your mind,
Vatamome John, vatamome Zen, and all your strength.
and all your strength. Y con todas tus fuerzas.
Oluwa desh lowo. Finished.
I don't know why, it's just when I looked at it, I thought that's absolutely true. Because it's telling everyone about Jesus. I mean God.
This is definitely one of the very important ones, because if this was the only verse you knew, it pretty much tells you all you need to know to be able to follow God and live a good life.
Honestly, I do not understand that question.
And it's inside somewhere in your head that makes you feel happy and overjoyed.
Well, sometimes I think of just like waves of some mist or something, like a ghost sort of thing.
I think my soul is part God, part Jesus, but also part my personality.
It means to always cherish him, I think, and always respond to him if he ever says something to you.
I think it would be you read the Bible, you follow God and Jesus, and you just try to be like God as much as possible.
Every time you love God and you need him, he will always be there for you. And every time you want him, like if you want him, he could do anything miracle to you anytime you want him. That's why we should love God every time.
Well, I've got loads. So one of them is no electronics at the table. You have to eat at the table as a family.
Go to bed at 8:30.
We need to get to bed at 9. Homework is first thing to be done, sadly.
One rule.
One rule that everyone should follow in the whole world. What could it be?
Never hate Jesus. I'd say that everyone has to follow and love Jesus and God.
That everybody's special. Obey God and every time.
Look at the whole picture and not just think all about yourself.
There's nothing I couldn't do to make God happy. Help me.
Hey everyone, I'm Scott, and today I want to talk about your brain. But before we do that, we need to talk about the greatest commandment in the Bible. I know what you're thinking, you're like, no, I want to talk about my brain, that's way more interesting, but we'll get there. Before we do that though, the greatest command in the Bible. In Matthew 22, we read about the greatest commandment in the Bible, and we know it's the greatest because that's what Jesus said. And if Jesus tells us something is the most important, then we should listen to him. And so in Matthew 22, what happens is this group called the Pharisees, they were Jesus's enemies. They come and try and trick Jesus. And they try and trick Jesus by saying, Jesus, what's the most important law in the Old Testament? And they wanted to trick Jesus because there's like 613 laws, and how could you say that one law of God is more important than the others? And there's no definitive answer, so they thought that they kind of finally were able to trick Jesus. Well, Jesus is not one to be tricked, and so Jesus has this whole thing under control. And look at how he answers this question of what is the greatest commandment. And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. Jesus says this is the most important commandment in the Bible. Love God with everything you have. And so it's not really like a commandment, like some rule that we don't want to follow. This is actually a pretty fun command. It's a command to love. And in fact, Jesus says there's a second commandment, which is almost as important, which is love your neighbor as yourself. And so the whole Christian life can be boiled down to two truths: love God, love other people. But I want to dig deeper into that commandment to love the Lord your God. Let's look exactly at what Jesus said one more time. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. In this passage, Jesus says that there's three different ways to love God: with your heart, your soul, your mind. In another passage, he had strength, but I want to focus on that last one, your mind, because remember, we wanted to talk about your brain. And so what does it mean to love God with all of your mind? What does it mean to love God with all of your brain? Well, here's the first thing it means. It means thinking rightly about God. You see, I don't think many Christians are loving God with all of their minds because they don't think rightly about God. You see, we all have a different view of God. Every person, whether you're a Christian or not, you have a view of God in your head. Maybe you think that God is like a nice old grandpa who makes rules but doesn't really care if you break them. So you don't really pay attention to following what he says. Or maybe you think that God is a jerk. He's like a dictator and you don't like him. You don't like his rules, and so you rebel against him. Or maybe you just feel like God started the world and walked away and he doesn't care. He's like some absent father. You see, we all have an idea of God, and that's really important. In fact, look at what this Christian teacher, a famous Christian teacher named A.W. Tozer, said about our thoughts about God. What comes into our minds when we think about God is the most important thing about us. Think about that statement. What you think about God is the most important thing about you because it's going to affect your choices in life, your lifestyle, your view of right and wrong. If you think God doesn't care about what you do, then you're going to do whatever you want. Or if you think that God doesn't love you, then that's going to affect the way that you live your life and you treat other people. And so your view of God is the most important thing about you. And here's the thing. I think a lot of Christians don't think rightly about God. See, a lot of Christians, I think that our view of God doesn't come from the Bible. It comes from pop culture or from friends or some church that we went to when we were kids that has nothing to do with the Bible and nothing to do with the God of the Bible. And so how do you think rightly about God? You start by going to the Bible because it's in the Bible that God has revealed himself. And so to love God with all of your mind means that you begin to understand who God really is, and you accept that and you submit to that. But there's a second way that we can love God with all of our minds. When we use our brains to honor God, then we're also fulfilling this command by Jesus. So how do you use your brain to honor God? You see, it happens when you use your brain to the fullest to the glory of God. Now, when I say use your brain to the fullest, I don't mean like a sci-fi movie where someone uses 100% of their brain and they begin to telepathically throw objects across the room. That would be really cool, but that's not what Jesus is getting at. What Jesus is saying is, look, whatever you do with your life, whether you are a doctor or an engineer or an artist or a teacher or a scientist, whatever you do, do it to the glory of God. Use your mind in your field of study, in your work, to the best of your ability, to the glory of God. If you're a scientist, be the greatest scientist you can to bring God glory. If you are a student, be the greatest student you can be. Study as hard as you can to bring glory to God. You see, to love God with all of your minds means that when you go to school, when you go to work, you go there and you say, how can I do my job? How can I study this thing? How can I think about this in a way that will bring God glory? And it also means that you ask yourself, how can I look at my field? How can I look at my occupation? How can I look at my job? How can I look at my studies differently because I have a relationship with God? How can I approach the medical field differently because I'm a Christian doctor as opposed to maybe a lot of the other doctors around me? How can I approach my job as an engineer, being a Christian engineer? How can I be an engineer for the glory of God? And so when we start connecting our jobs and our schoolwork to our faith with Jesus, we are using our minds to their fullest to bring God glory. And I think that's just some of what Jesus meant when he said to love God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. It's a challenge to think rightly about God, but also to think rightly about thinking, to understand and ask the question, with whatever I do in my life, how can I do it to the glory of God? So I want to challenge you and I want to ask, do you love God with all of your mind? Do you think rightly about God? And then do you go to your job or your school saying, how can I use my mind to its fullest to honor God, to bring him glory, and to share his love with other people? Thanks so much for checking out this video. If you like this one, you might want to check out another video we have called Can Intelligent People Believe in God? But if you have any questions or comments, please put those in the comments below, and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks.
A lot of times we can have misconceptions about who God is, about his character, about what the Bible actually says about him, about how he actually feels about us. So that's why we are doing this series called The Greatest. That's why we're talking about the greatest command that God has ever given us. So we can help our brains understand what God is actually like, and that he doesn't give us commandments and rules because he wants to drop an iron fist on us and because he wants to control our everything we do. Rather, he gives us commands looking out for us because he knows what's best for us. He knows that we were created to love people. He knows that we were created to love God. So that's why he's given us the command to love God and to love others. He says that the entire law is fulfilled in this. So next week, you guys, we're going to be starting this series off. Week number 1. Bring your friends. Looking so forward to seeing you guys. Hope you have an awesome week, and I hope you know we love you guys. Peace!